To fight for a marginalized group, you have to claim to speak in their name. You draw a circle and say, "These are the people I represent." But attempting to define who belongs inside that circle often ignites an intellectual war. In 1946, sitting at a café in Paris, Simone de Beauvoir set out to write an autobiographical essay. She intended to describe herself, but found she could not begin without answering a prior question. What has it meant to be a woman? Her first instinct was that the question hardly applied. She was a brilliant philosopher who lived independently. Then she looked again at the books, laws, and assumptions of her world, and saw they were built by and for men. Her freedom within that world was the privilege of someone permitted to forget her sex. To challenge the masculine default, she realized she had to define what a woman actually was. Beauvoir argued humanity defined itself as masculine. Woman became the inessential other, existing only in relation to man. Existentialism valued transcendence, shaping the world rather than being shaped by it. Patriarchy reserved this for men, condemning women to immanence, a fixed, repeated role. This was the logic behind her most famous line: "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman." Anatomy was a physical fact, but woman as a social category was a product of education, custom, and law. The Vatican placed the book on its index of prohibited books. Albert Camus said it made the French male look ridiculous. It sold 20,000 copies in its first week. By framing womanhood as a social construct, Beauvoir provided the rationale for dismantling it. However, by seeking a singular definition of oppression, she left a vacuum regarding the specific women she was actually describing. By the 1980s, the universal definition Beauvoir had established began to fracture. Beauvoir's woman was white, middle class, and alienated from the labor market. She was a figure whose primary oppression was her confinement to the domestic sphere. But bell hooks pointed out that black women in the United States had spent centuries performing the labor that white women were supposedly denied. Hooks argued that this unacknowledged labor subsidized the leisure time that allowed white women to feel oppressed by their domesticity. Black women faced a dual oppression. They were exploited for their work while being sexually objectified through a myth of permanent availability that was used to justify the rape of enslaved women and their descendants. To Hooks, white feminism had taken one highly specific history and named it universal, effectively erasing the majority of women from the movement. In 1990, Judith Butler escalated the problem. In Gender Trouble, they argued that the very act of defining a group is a source of exclusion. Butler's premise was that conditions for membership are also mechanisms for exclusion. By this logic, feminism's reliance on a stable gender identity was its primary weakness. They proposed that gender is performative, instituted through a stylized repetition of acts like a certain walk, voice, or way of sitting. These gestures are repeated so often they create the illusion of an inner essence. We believe we are expressing a natural gender, but we are actually producing it. Underground drag performers exposed the trick. By inhabiting femininity self-consciously, they proved there was no original woman being copied, only the copy itself. Butler aimed to shift feminist politics toward disruption, targeting the rituals that hold gender in place and forcing the apparatus to stutter. Butler had dismantled the trap of definition, but their theory seemed to dissolve the very subject feminism was built to protect. In 1999, the philosopher Martha Nussbaum published a sharp rebuttal titled The Professor of Parody. Nussbaum championed the capabilities approach. She evaluated justice based on concrete actions a society permits: reading, voting, walking safely, and owning property. She contrasted Butler's theory with the needs of women facing starvation, illiteracy, and domestic violence. These women did not need periodic performances. They needed laws, schools, and prosecutors. Nussbaum argued that Butler's politics had retreated into the seminar room and called that retreat radical. For those who are beaten or disenfranchised, Nussbaum wrote, it is not liberating to reenact those conditions periodically. Such women prefer food, votes, and the integrity of their bodies. Her argument highlighted the divide between academic theory and physical safety. A subversion of gender roles in a lecture hall provides no defense against violence in the home. Nussbaum's ultimate conclusion was devastating. She called Butler's approach a hip quietism that collaborated with evil. Feminism demands more, she wrote, and women deserve better. This 50-year war over definition has left a permanent mark on modern politics. When you speak in the name of women, whose body are you thinking of, and whose are you leaving out? It presents an impossible choice. Do you stop defining the category entirely, or do you accept a definition so you can fight for the laws and schools you cannot win without a name?